Have you ever wondered why some people can bend the will of others without raising their voice, without threats, without even seeming to try? They move through the world like quiet storms, subtle, unshakable, yet capable of altering the entire landscape of another's mind. To the untrained eye, it looks like magic. But beneath the surface, it is pure psychology, ancient instincts and archetypal energies, the invisible strings that have guided human interaction for millennia. In Jung's world, to manipulate is not merely to control, it is to awaken or exploit the hidden parts of the psyche, the shadow selves, that people hide even from themselves. The one who understands this knows that most human behavior is not logical, but emotional. Desire, fear, shame, validation, these are the levers. And most people walk through life handing those levers to anyone who will take them. Think of it. Every human carries a silent hunger to be seen, to be affirmed, to feel significant in the eyes of another. Some bury it under pride. Some disguise it with arrogance. Some drown it in service to others. But it is there, pulsing beneath every choice. The manipulator does not attack this hunger directly. They circle it, feed it in measured doses, create both the thirst and the water. They make you feel that their attention is rare, and in scarcity, its value multiplies. To see through the soul of another, you must first learn to watch not merely their words, but their micro-expressions, their pauses, their subtle changes in tone. People reveal themselves in the smallest betrayals of their composure. The moment their eyes linger too long, the fraction of a second they hesitate before answering, the involuntary tightening of their jaw when a certain name is mentioned, these are openings. And yet, the most dangerous manipulators understand that brute force creates resistance. Instead, they guide the other's ego into believing the idea was theirs all along. A man convinced is a man owned, but a man unaware he's convinced will defend his captor as though it were his own freedom. This is not about trickery, it is about shaping reality so that the other person cannot tell where your will ends and theirs begins. You see, the shadow within each person longs for expression, but the ego censors it. The woman who prides herself on being independent still harbors the longing to be chosen. The man who boasts about power often secretly craves the safety of surrender. When you identify this hidden truth and give it a pathway to breathe, they will lean toward you without knowing why. But manipulation at its highest level is not chaotic. It is patient. It does not rush. It seeds. A word here, a withdrawal there, a subtle contradiction that forces the other to chase resolution. You plant questions that germinate in their mind when they're alone. You offer validation, then take it away, letting absence become its own persuasion. This dance between presence and distance makes your influence not just desired, but needed. Yet remember, in manipulating another, you awaken parts of yourself you may not be ready to face. The same instincts that allow you to pierce their defenses will inevitably turn inward, forcing you to confront your own shadow. This is why true mastery of manipulation is inseparable from self-mastery. Without it, you risk being consumed by the very forces you wield. Some will call it control. Others will call it charisma. But in truth, it is the art of becoming the mirror in which another sees both their deepest longing and their most feared truth, without realizing it's you holding the glass. The subtle manipulator knows that the human soul is addicted to patterns. Predictable rhythms create trust, but disruption creates obsession. It is in this tension between stability and uncertainty that influence thrives. Too much consistency, and you become background noise. Too much chaos, and they retreat in self-preservation. The skill lies in walking that razor's edge, where they are never entirely certain of where they stand with you, yet always longing to find out. In Jungian terms, this is the delicate play between the persona, the mask they show the world, and the anima, or animus, the deep unconscious image of the ideal other that silently drives attraction and trust. Every person you meet projects this inner image onto those around them, searching for the figure who will match it. To manipulate is to subtly shape yourself to fit that archetype, not fully, but just enough to awaken the recognition. A complete fit brings comfort. A partial fit stirs fascination. Observe how their eyes light when you touch a certain topic, how their voice warms when you use certain words. Each person has emotional doorways, phrases, and gestures that bypass logic and go straight to the limbic brain. Find these doorways. And you are no longer speaking to their conscious self, you are speaking to the ancient self, the primal mind that existed before reason. That self does not negotiate, it responds. But the most artful manipulation does not shout, it whispers. It is not the blazing sun that forces growth, but the quiet shift of seasons that alters the entire landscape. You lead them to conclusions without direct command. You plant seeds so deeply they believe they sprouted naturally. In time, they may forget you planted them at all. That is the highest compliment a manipulator can receive, the complete erasure of your hand in their transformation. And yet, there is a danger in this craft. Influence breeds dependence not only in them, but in you. To feel the pull of another's world bending toward your will is intoxicating, but intoxication blinds. If you do not remain grounded, you risk building an empire of control, only to find yourself its most devoted prisoner, chained by the need to maintain it. There is also the shadow of morality to confront. Manipulation is power, and power demands responsibility. To wield it without self-awareness is to invite chaos into both your world and theirs. The Stoics warned against seeking mastery over others before mastering oneself. For Seneca, the truest control was over one's own mind. Every external conquest was hollow without inner sovereignty. And so, the manipulator must decide, is this power a means of survival, a tool for creation, or a weapon for destruction? The answer will not only define your influence over others, but the very shape of your soul. To truly understand this, you must strip away the illusions of separation. Every time you guide another's choices, you are shaping your own fate. Every chord you pluck in their heart resonates within yours. The strings are never one way. They bind the manipulator to the manipulated, weaving a fate in which neither can fully escape the other. The question, then, is not whether you can manipulate. The question is whether you can bear the consequences of becoming the axis upon which another's world turns. For once they orbit you, you must either hold them in your gravity or release them into the void. The heart of manipulation is not brute persuasion. It is the mastery of emotional currents invisible to the untrained eye. Words alone rarely sway a soul. It is the subtle choreography of energy, timing, and silence that bends the human will. A single pause at the right moment can do more than 1,000 arguments. Silence, when laced with meaning, becomes a mirror in which the other person projects their own fears, hopes, and interpretations. And what they imagine often grips them more tightly than anything you could have spoken. Jung understood that the unconscious mind is always searching for resolution, a gap in understanding, a half-told truth, an unanswered question. These are psychological hooks. They create an itch in the psyche, and the manipulator becomes the only one who can scratch it. You offer fragments, not wholes. You let their imagination do the rest, because imagination makes them complicit. They think they are interpreting reality, when in fact they are finishing a puzzle you designed. This is why the manipulator is never in a hurry. The unskilled push too quickly, revealing their intention and sparking resistance. The adept knows that influence deepens over time, layered like sediment until it becomes part of the landscape. You are not convincing them. You are becoming the lens through which they see themselves and the world. Once the lens is set, the picture changes forever. And here lies the paradox. The more control you have, the less you need to exert it. The truly influential rarely make demands. They create desires so strong that the other rushes to fulfill them without being asked. This is power distilled when your will is not imposed, but chosen, when your presence alone alters the trajectory of another's thoughts. But manipulation also thrives on contrast. To hold power, you must be willing to give it away in measured doses. The push and pull, the grant and the withdrawal, the warmth followed by cool detachment. These fluctuations are not accidents. They mimic the unpredictable rhythm of life itself, keeping the other attuned to you as though you are the weather they must constantly check. Predictability breeds complacency. Unpredictability breeds fixation. Yet in wielding this power, you cannot ignore the truth within. Manipulation is also a reflection of your own shadow. Each time you play upon another's insecurities, you awaken your own. You see, the same levers that move them exist in you. Recognizing them in others is possible only because they live in your own psyche. This recognition can either make you dangerously arrogant or profoundly wise. The Stoics would caution you here. They would remind you that control over another is fleeting, but control over yourself is eternal. Epictetus taught that no one can harm you unless you give them your mind. By the same measure, no one can be truly manipulated unless they surrender that inner authority. And so the deepest form of influence may not be the bending of another's will, but the art of leading them to willingly place it in your hands. To reach that point, you must be more than persuasive. You must become indispensable, not in a material sense, but in the psychological one. You must become the rare combination of challenge and sanctuary, the figure who both stirs their uncertainty and soothes it. For when you are both the wound and the balm, they will return to you endlessly, not out of duty, but out of need. To manipulate at the deepest level is to understand that people do not cling to you for who you are, but for how they feel in your presence. Identity is secondary. Emotional experience is everything. A person may forget your words, even your face, but they will never forget the state of being you draw from them. This is why influence is not maintained through constant contact, but through the memory you leave behind, a resonance that lingers when you are absent. The human psyche is addicted to emotional loops. If you can become both the question and the answer in someone's mind, you create a cycle they cannot easily escape. They will keep returning to you, not for closure, but for the tension you sustain. It is the same principle that makes stories compelling, the unresolved thread that keeps the audience in their seat until the final page. The manipulator never gives that final page. They only offer glimpses of it, ensuring the story never truly ends. Jungian psychology teaches that much of human attraction, whether romantic, platonic, or hierarchical, arises from projection. People do not see you. They see the archetype they have unconsciously assigned to you. The wise manipulator does not fight this projection. They refine it. They strip away the parts of themselves that break the illusion and amplify the traits that feed it. They become an idealized mirror, one that reflects not reality, but the version of reality the other most wants to see. This is why some manipulators seem almost supernatural in their effect. They do not overwhelm you with their presence. They draw you into your own depths. They coax you to reveal yourself. And in doing so, they make you feel understood in ways you didn't think possible. This is intoxicating because it bypasses the rational mind and speaks directly to the soul. But it is also dangerous. For the moment you become someone's mirror, you inherit the responsibility of what that reflection does to them. If the reflection elevates them, they may worship you. If it destroys them, they may curse you. Both responses bind them to you, and both can destroy you if you are unprepared for their weight. The Stoics might say that true mastery is knowing when to release the grip. The ability to manipulate is power, but the ability to let go is wisdom. When you no longer need to hold them, yet they remain in your orbit, it is not because you forced them, it is because you became part of their internal architecture. That is influence that outlives presence. And yet, the manipulator must always remember that the mind they guide is not clay to be molded without consequence. Every action, every planted thought, sends ripples through that person's life, shaping choices and futures in ways even you cannot predict. To wield this art is to accept that you are playing with forces both delicate and dangerous, the fragile scaffolding of another's inner world. In the end, manipulation is not merely about bending others to your will. At its core, it is about the power to alter perception itself, to make the invisible strings of the psyche dance to your chosen rhythm. But perception is reality, and when you change someone's reality, you change their destiny. Whether that destiny is light or dark depends on the hand that guides it. True manipulation is less about the moment of influence and more about the architecture of belief you construct within another's mind. It is not a single act, but a framework, an invisible cathedral of ideas, emotions, and associations that they carry with them long after you've left the room. Once built, it becomes the filter through which they interpret every interaction with you, and often with the world. The great secret is that the human mind craves coherence. If you can align yourself with a narrative they already believe, you become an extension of their truth. But if you can subtly alter that narrative without them realizing, you become the author of their new reality. This is why master manipulators rarely confront someone's beliefs head-on. Instead, they plant new truths like seeds in familiar soil, letting them sprout as if they were native growths. Jung understood that the unconscious does not distinguish between what is real and what is vividly imagined. A suggestion when delivered with emotional weight, bypasses skepticism and takes root in the psyche as though it were lived experience. The manipulator, then, becomes a dream weaver seeding visions, emotions, and possibilities that feel entirely self-generated. And the more the target believes these ideas are their own, the stronger the bond becomes. But manipulation at this depth requires discipline. Every word, every glance, every silence must be intentional. The novice manipulator reveals too much, intoxicated by early success, while the adept knows that influence thrives in subtlety. It is not the hammer, but the chisel, that shapes the stone without shattering it. Emotional leverage is most potent when it dances between pleasure and withdrawal. Too much affirmation, and they take you for granted. Too much absence, and they forget you. The rhythm must be irregular yet purposeful, creating just enough unpredictability to keep their mind tethered to your next move. This is why certain relationships, even toxic ones, feel impossible to escape. They are not chains of logic, but loops of anticipation and relief. And in this loop lies the manipulator's most potent weapon: contrast. Darkness makes light feel brighter. Silence makes words feel louder. Rejection makes acceptance feel sacred. You control the intensity of these contrasts, shaping their emotional highs and lows until their inner weather moves to the beat of your hand. Yet this is where the danger swells. When you master the inner climate of another, you risk becoming addicted to the storm. The temptation is to push further, to see how far you can bend them, forgetting that every act of control also writes itself into your own psyche. The shadows you awaken in others awaken in you as well, and without vigilance, you may become enslaved to the very hunger you feed. The Stoics would remind you that no empire built on control can truly be secure. Marcus Aurelius wrote that, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." A manipulator who forgets this will eventually crumble, undone by their own dependence on external obedience. True mastery is knowing when to step back, to let the architecture you've built stand or fall without your hand upon it. Because in the end, the most lasting manipulation is the kind you no longer need to maintain, the one where your influence has woven itself so deeply into their identity that even your absence reinforces your presence. That is not just control, that is legacy. The pinnacle of manipulation is when your influence ceases to feel like influence at all. It becomes the air they breathe, the lens through which they see, the quiet voice that sounds like their own but carries your cadence. At this stage, you're not simply part of their life, you are part of their inner world, woven into the subconscious patterns that dictate their choices. They may think they are acting freely, yet every path they take winds back toward the blueprint you've set. This is the point where manipulation transcends persuasion and becomes transformation. You have not merely swayed opinions or nudged behavior. You have reshaped the architecture of self. Jung would call this the dangerous union of the ego and shadow, where what was once hidden now operates openly, but in alignment with the image you've cultivated. To them, this feels like self-discovery. In truth, it is curated revelation. To reach this level, the manipulator becomes an alchemist of identity. You identify the fragments in them: shattered self-esteem, buried dreams, unspoken fears, and piece them together into a new mosaic. The brilliance of this method is that the picture you create feels whole to them, yet it subtly binds them to you as the one who helped them find themselves. And human loyalty, when born from perceived salvation, is among the most enduring bonds. But this art is not sustained by intensity alone. It requires precision. You must know when to disappear, when to reappear, when to speak in riddles, and when to give clarity. Disappearance deepens their need. Reappearance feeds it. Mystery keeps the soil fertile, but certainty waters it just enough to ensure growth. This is the endless rhythm: push and pull, conceal and reveal, until your absence becomes as defining as your presence. And here lies the great irony. The more subtle your control, the less they will resist it. For it does not feel like control. People fight visible chains, but they will carry invisible ones with pride, mistaking them for their own adornments. The greatest manipulation is invisible because it aligns so closely with the other's desires that they defend it against anyone who questions it. And here lies the great irony. The more subtle your control, the less they will resist it, for it does not feel like control. People fight visible chains, but they will carry invisible ones with pride, mistaking them for their own adornments. The greatest manipulation is invisible because it aligns so closely with the other's desires that they defend it against anyone who questions it. The Stoics would urge caution here. Seneca might warn that to bind another in this way is to bind yourself also, for you become the custodian of their mental world. If they collapse, some part of you collapses with them. To carry that weight requires not only cunning, but strength of character. Without it, your power will turn corrosive, eating away at both you and those ensnared by you. And so, the question becomes not how far you can go, but how far you should go. To manipulate is to touch the most sacred parts of a human being, their sense of self, their perception of reality, their autonomy. If you wield this power recklessly, you do not just risk harming them, you risk losing yourself in the intoxication of your own influence. In the end, mastery is not in keeping someone under your control forever. It is in knowing you could and choosing release. For the manipulator who can let go without fear is the one who has truly conquered the deepest form of control, the control over their own desire to dominate. The final evolution of manipulation is paradoxical. It is the art of making yourself unnecessary while ensuring you are unforgettable. At first glance, this may seem counterintuitive. Why loosen the reins once you have full command? But here lies the secret. Control maintained by force is fragile, while control that survives your absence is eternal. When they carry your influence within them as instinct, not memory, you have reached the summit. This is where the manipulator steps out of the role of puppeteer and becomes something far more potent, the architect of an inner compass that always points back to you. You no longer need to speak for your voice to be heard in their mind. They anticipate your approval, your disapproval, your imagined reactions, and in doing so, they govern themselves in your favor without your direct involvement. This is the quiet immortality of influence. From a Jungian perspective, this is the full integration of the projection you once embodied. The anima, the animus, the savior figure, all dissolve into their own psyche, yet retain your shape. You have helped them rewrite their myth, and in doing so, you have become part of their legend. Even if they outgrow your presence, they will carry your imprint into every interaction that follows. But the Stoics remind us, power over others is nothing compared to power over oneself. The temptation at this stage is to tighten your grip, to test the limits of your reach. Yet the strongest proof of mastery is the ability to release without resentment, to step away, knowing that the architecture you built will stand without constant repair. A manipulator ruled by attachment becomes a slave to the very bonds they forged. This is why the wisest manipulators end their influence like a well-crafted story at the precise moment when the audience still craves more. They leave behind an unfinished sentence, an unanswered question, a lingering presence that echoes in absence. People will replay the moments, searching for closure, never realizing that the lack of it is the closure. And so, manipulation, at its peak, is not about domination but transcendence. You rise above the need to control the outer world because you understand how deeply you already live within it. Your power no longer depends on pulling strings. It is woven into the fabric of their thought, a thread that will not unravel even when you are gone. In the end, the only true manipulation worth mastering is the manipulation of your own hunger for control. For when you can walk away at the height of your influence, untouched by the need to possess, you achieve the freedom that no power over others can match. This is where the manipulator transforms into the sovereign, not the ruler of others, but the ruler of the self. And in that sovereignty lies the most unshakable truth of all. The one who needs nothing cannot be moved by anything, and the one who cannot be moved moves the world.